This talk is Everything Old is New Again, a look at historic cons and their transition to a digital world. Just want to say that, make sure you guys are in the right room. I know 2 other really cool talks are going on right now, so if you are here for this talk, thank you. And thanks to CypherCon for having me. I'm really excited to be here and talk to you guys. Alright, so a quick introductory about myself. My name is Stephanie, and my handle is Snow. And I've won a couple of cool contests, the Social Engineering Capture the Flag at DEF CON 22. And then a couple years later, I was on the winning team for SaintCon. It's a conference based out of Utah. They have a contest called the Vault. It's a physical security challenge, and it's really cool. So there's a modular building, and you have to complete a handful of flags outside of the building, such as lockpicking, RFID cloning. And once you're able to actually break into the room, there's flags on the inside. So there's flags on the computer, you have to bypass alarms, there's a biometric safe that you had to bypass, and once you did all these and got all these clues, the end goal was to defuse a bomb. So it was a lot of fun. If anyone here is interested in physical security, I would suggest going and practicing, and it is just such a fun time. So I was on the winning team for that. I've done quite a few physical security handcuffs. Hopefully this table's wood, it's probably not, but never been in handcuffs. Disney fangirl, that's kind of where the handle comes from. A lot of people assume it's the cold shit that falls from the sky. That's not where it comes from. I love board games. If I am home on a Saturday and not working, I'm typically playing games like Ticket to Ride, Pandemic, Munchkin, all that kind of stuff. So I'm really excited about the conference going on this weekend. How many people are staying for that conference, the gaming con? Oh man, missed opportunity, guys. All right, and then before I was in security, I was a special effects makeup artist, so I was on a lot of really low budget college and indie films that you guys have never seen. And then I love to cook. So what I do for a living is I'm a people hacker at X-Force Red. So what that means is I'm a social engineer, so I do a lot of phishing campaigns, vishing, which is voice phishing, things like that, a lot of physical security assessments. So just a reminder, this talk represents my views and not my employer's views. So before I want to get into the agenda, I like to explain the reason why I develop the talks that I do. And I did this for a handful of reasons. Social engineering talks, which primarily are my focus in the talks I've given in the past, are all kind of sounding the same. There's only so much you can do with social engineering. And yes, new techniques and tools come up, but not as often as pen testing. When you look at pen testing and hacking, technology changes so frequently that gives researchers and hackers time to go out and find ways to bypass technology, make new tools, things like that. It's a lot more tricky when it comes to social engineering. So it's really something that I want to go back and spend my time and kind of learn more of the history and learn more about different con men and con women and different types of cons that have happened. So that's kind of the impetus of why I created this talk, because I wanted to go back and see the history. Some of the cool things I learned were George C. Parker. Does that name ring a bell for anyone? He is the man that sold the Brooklyn Bridge many times. One of my favorite things about him is he didn't just sell the Brooklyn Bridge. That's what people associate him with. He also sold the Statue of Liberty, Madison Square Garden, and tons of different things in New York. But that's also not the thing that impressed me. Something that people don't realize is he spent tons of time researching to pick his marks very carefully. He wasn't going to pick some New Yorker who already knew the history of, where they live in these landmarks. He picked someone new, but not someone who was broke. So he spent a lot of time figuring out who he wanted to target. And he spent a lot of time creating forged documents, so it actually looked legitimate. So something really cool about him. Has anyone here seen The Greatest Showman, the musical? Show of hands. A good handful of people. So that movie, for those of you who have not seen it, is on the life of P.T. Barnum, of Barnum and Bailey. So in the beginning of the movie, he wore a hat that said Prince of Humbugs, and that was his nickname. And for those of you that don't know, a humbug is a con or a trick. P.T. was a very cheap man, and he wanted to make a lot of money. One of the ways he did this was when he created his museum, he realized that it was popular, but it was so popular that people were staying for very long amounts of time, which meant he couldn't get new people in and make new money. So he hung up signs throughout his museum that read, "This way to egress." People had no clue what egress meant, so they would follow the signs out of curiosity. They followed it to a door that locked behind them that put them outside of the museum. So to get back in, you actually had to buy a new ticket. So I've gotten to learn a lot of really cool tricks, and I'm really hoping to find some that I can incorporate when I go out and do social engineering campaigns. So just a little bit of talk about this talk, our agenda. I'm going to be talking about types of confidence tricks, a couple different categories. I'm going to go over 5 cons, and again, this is a very short talk, and I talk fast, so I apologize. If you have questions, please reach out to me after. But I'm going to go over 5 cons, kind of show how they've been used in the past, and how they're being used today, more of a digital sense. Talking about why they work, and then kind of some tips that we could do to avoid them. So, types of confidence tricks. The first one is the Goldberg scam. This one kind of got really popular in the gold rush days. So what con men would do is they would take a piece of lead and coat it in gold. And it felt about the same texture and weight as gold, so they would sell that. So this scam is pretty much selling something for more than what it's worth. Then we have our advance fee scam. This one's very popular. How this works is you're promised a large amount of money, but before you get that money, you have to provide something, whether it's, you have to pay for legal fees, for transportation fees, or just kind of upfront money to show that you're good for it and you're not going to scam them back. The next one's persuasion fraud. This is what I do most of the time when I'm doing social engineering assessments. I'm using different influence techniques to try to con people into doing something which most of the time they should not be doing. Then we have extortion. That's straight up blackmail. That's holding something over your head and you have to pay me money to keep my mouth shut. And then lastly, online scams. This is something I think a lot of us are familiar with. This is your phishing, this is your tech support, things of that nature. Alright, so getting into our first scam, it's called a pig in a poke. This is a Goldberg scam, and it was really popular around the Middle Ages. So how this works is one of the more popular proteins people would eat was a suckling pig. And how merchants sold that is they put the pig inside of a burlap sack and they sewed it shut. The sack was called a poke, pig in a poke. And what con artists realized was that there were a lot of cats and dogs, lots of strays. So they would take those animals and sew them shut and sell them for a profit. And this was a very, very popular con, and they would do this at a city and then just kind of move cities. And so they would make a lot of money off of it. If you've heard the expression, the cat's out of the bag, that's where this saying is believed to come from. So how it's being used today. I'm pretty sure a lot of people in this room are familiar with Bitcoin and how it became very popular, especially around the late 2017. So what scam artists would do is they saw something was hot and trending, so that was their in. So some of the ways they would scam people is they created fake apps, fake wallet apps. If you download this app, the attacker now had access to your phone. Some of them were actually creating literal pieces of coin and saying it was Bitcoin and selling it. Unfortunately, it worked. All right, then we have the pigeon drop. So this is an advance fee scam. It was really popular it happened throughout the early 1900s, but it became popular in the 1950s, and it's still something that we're actually seeing today. So this scam is very complicated. It would be easier if I had visuals to show you how it worked. I have them listed out step by step, but it really involves 2 con men scamming 1 person. So what they would do is the first con man, we're going to call him just con man number 1, would build rapport with someone. They might ask for directions, make small talk against their pigeon or their mark. And so as they're talking, the second con man would come up behind them and drop a wallet full of money. And he would pick up and say, "Hey, does this belong to anyone?" And they would both say no. there's no ID in it, but it's full of cash. And he'd say, okay, well, let me go check with the store owner to see if it belongs to anyone, but maybe if not, we could just split the money. So what the first con man would do would be like, wait a second, you might just take off with the money. Let me hold the money and you go ask. And the second con man would say, yeah, but then you could take off with the money. So the first con man would say, okay, look, I'll give you $50 just to show I'm good for it. And then the second con man would look to the mark and say, okay, well, what are you going to put up? And typically they would put up some money or even their ID or their credit card, and he would take off. So the first con man's sitting with this wallet. He would put it in an envelope, and he'd have another envelope in his pocket full of trash or newspaper clippings that felt like real thing. And after a while, he's like, you know what, this feels weird, I'm going to go check on him. And he's going to just hand the envelope of fake money, fake stuffings, to the mark, so the mark feels confident, like, oh, okay, I'm holding the money, it's cool. And they both take off. So they're able to have the money from that. So that's actually, if you look up pigeon drop and just look up news articles, this is something that's still happening today. However, moving into more of a digital world, if you look at Prince of Nigeria, how many people have received an email from His Highness? I assume everyone in this room. I get way too many of them. But that's kind of how this con is being used today. You get an email from royalty, and they need your help. They need to transfer money. The ruse is always slightly different, but in order to transfer this money, and they'll give you half of it for helping, they just need you to pay the wire transfer fees, or they need you to pay something up front. And of course, once you pay it, you never hear from them again. All right, grandparents. I assume everyone here has once had grandparents in their lives. Unfortunately, grandparents are scammed a lot. And so how this con has worked, and this is more of a recent con, but people will call up a grandparent and say, hey, I am your grandson, granddaughter. I need help. I am stuck traveling. My credit card isn't working. I need to get home. And more times than not, they want to help. So they'll provide credit card information over the phone, or they'll just straight up do a wire transfer. And it's being used the same way today, but typically, as far as like a digital form, people are coming at these grandparents with Facebook messages or email. But they have a lot more credibility now because of Facebook and Snapchat. So if I actually see someone posting a picture with their grandpa and calling him like Papa, right, or some unique name, they have that to build credibility. If they're Snapchatting pictures of them in Thailand, they have that credibility. So the more information they're able to find online, it gives them so much more credibility where they are able to build that relationship and get the money from the grandparent. All right, catfishing. So this is a persuasion fraud. And so how the con has worked in the past is typically through mail order brides. So women would contact lonely men, and through letters, they'll exchange letters, or sometimes post it in a catalog, so the men will actually reach out. And they'll go back and forth and say how they want to marry them and move to America, but they have to get there. And to get there, they need money. Once the mark sends the money, they never hear from them again. So how is it being used today? Tinder, right? So one of my favorite stats that I found that's just crazy is by 2014, Tinder was seeing more than 1 billion swipes each day worldwide. That's insane. That's a lot of swiping. But how it's being used today is bots have been created to chat with people. And if you kind of realize it's not a bot and keep chatting, the conversation might get a little hot and heavy. And the bot might say, hey, let's take this conversation offline. Or do you want to see my cam? And they'll provide a malicious link. All right, then we have the badger game. And this is a type of extortion fraud. So how it's worked in the past, and this is a pretty popular con to see in movies. A woman elicits a man at a bar, and typically he's married, or maybe he has some kind of secrets that she tries to steal from him. But they either get into the act of an affair or the promise of an affair, and she has some kind of evidence of this. and she holds it over his head for money. I will tell your wife, I will tell your boss, but I have to have something to keep me quiet. So that's how the con has worked. And how it's being used today, sorry, the first line of that email it cracks me up every time I read it. Good morning, my flopper. So what people or attackers have done is they'll send an email to people and say, hey, I hacked into your laptop and I've watched your webcam. You have done things that you shouldn't be doing, and I took videos of it. If you don't pay me, I'm going to release the video to everyone in your email contacts. And unfortunately, this is a pretty popular con, I'm assuming, because a lot of people do things in front of their webcam that they shouldn't be doing in front of their webcam. So those are kind of the 5 cons and kind of how they've been used and how they're being used. But the thing that interests me the most is, why do they work? So the very first reason is greed. People are greedy. If they are promised money, a lot of times they're going to do whatever they have to do to get more money. The other thing is, people are helpful by nature, and this is something that I use to my advantage very often during physical security assessments. I will show up with a handful of donuts or just paperwork, things that like I need both of my hands for, and I'll show up to a badge store and I'll struggle like I'm trying to find my badge in my purse, but I have no badge in my purse. And 9 out of 10 times someone will hold the door open for me because people want to be helpful. The last thing is they trust you. They don't really think that anyone would want to be malicious to them. Like, why would they? And they don't take the time to stop and think about the repercussions of what could happen. If I let this person in the door, I've never seen them before, but what could happen? So stopping and thinking is a huge key in this. All right, so moving on, how can you help? All right, I know this is a bit of a stretch. It kind of does not make sense. I'm talking about cons, and now I'm talking about talking to your friends and family. The issue is our friends and family are the people that typically fall for these kind of scams. So if you take anything away from this, just realize there's a lot of people outside of us in this room and conference that don't see through things right away. If they get an email where there's a lot of urgency, they might panic and do it right away. But to us, that's a flag, that's a warning sign. So I just kind of listed out things that I think would be beneficial to talk to people, especially older members in the family. And these are things that don't take a lot of time. Helping them set up 2-factor and a password manager, that doesn't take long. And it could really protect them later and probably save you time because you might be the one that's helping them later with all of their issues. So I mentioned I talk fast, and I apologize, but I do have a few minutes if anyone does have questions. If you do not have questions, my DMs are open on Twitter, which sometimes is a mistake, but I would be more than happy to answer them later. So yeah, please, if anyone has questions. Yes?
Any books you'd recommend on historical cons?
Ooh, yes, I do have a ton of books. I will tweet them all out later, so it's all in one place. But yeah, any other questions? Oh, you guys are quiet.
Are there any cons that are more difficult to pull off today, just with, let's say, paranoia in the culture, or things that in the last few years have just been a lot of news about this kind of stuff?
Yeah, I think so. The pigeon drops, like the old school pigeon drops with the money, those are. So they kind of resurfaced in the early 2000s. Like when I was looking, I found tons of articles about them. But I think because they became so popular and so noticeable, it put up a lot of red flags for people because they're not just talking about like conferences. Like it's on actual news, and people are learning a lot more about it. There's also a scam called the short change scam, and this is a complicated one, and it works with retail. And you provide them cash, you buy a small purchase and you get change back. And then you say, hey, I need this change broken. And with a number of exchanges, you pretty much get $20 out of them at the end of it. But that's something I've noticed a lot of my retail clients are actually training their employees on, is to catch this. So I think the more organizations that see things that specifically apply to them and train on it, it makes it a lot more difficult. Yes?
My question's kind of two-part.
Okay.
In the evolution of cons, and in your research, does it seem like the people who are transitioning the cons into a digital world are the same people, or is it just a whole different set of people? And are they adapting those cons because they've studied them, the past cons, or are they just like kind of common sense where they pick up on the same kind of thing?
So most of the cons that I've seen, like the older ones, you'll see them in waves. So I wouldn't assume those are the same people because there's huge gaps of time. But like the grandparent scam, I would most definitely bet that that's the same kind of people. I think it probably worked for them before, internet and Facebook and all that stuff. Or I think it worked well for them, but once they saw, their marks and found them online and found all their family members, all things, I think it made it so much easier. So in that sense, I think those are probably the same kind of people who are probably making a lot more money. Yes?
So this is playing off that question.
Mm-hmm.
It may be going beyond where your expertise is, but working as a managed service provider with a lot of small businesses, we're seeing less of phishing emails that require clicking on something where two-factor or password managers would really be effective. It's more wiring of funds. It's long engagements with multiple emails back and forth. And in the process of that, it's clear that the homework has been done.
Right.
Like the first guy you talked about with the Brooklyn Bridge, where they have looked up key information on this person. And the question I'm having, especially from my clients, is that small businesses think they're not going to get targeted. Who is doing all this homework? Like, is this becoming, do you know the background of the industry behind that? Is it local organized crime?
Yeah, so who's doing it, I don't know. But I have noticed, like, when I do phishing campaigns, my more successful campaigns are the ones that I spend the more time researching and really understanding the organization. Also, if I'm pretending to be someone inside the organization, like HR, things like that, or have those email threads that you were talking about, those are the ones where my success rate goes up crazy high. But to answer your question, I don't know. I think it could be a mix of tons of different people, but targeting small businesses is something that we're seeing a lot more. A lot of times attackers used to go for the big ones, but now I have seen, a lot of smaller businesses and medium businesses being attacked. Yes?
Do you have any strategy recommendations for dealing with the short links like Google and cookies and that type of thing when they're on social media? Are those to be avoided at all costs at all times, or is there some other strategy?
So there is a way, and I can't remember how it is right now, but you can look up a short link to see what it goes to without going to it. Does anyone know what it is off the top of their head? I can't remember.
Unshorten it. It's just unshorten it.
Oh, just unshorten it. Right, and so you could actually see what it is without going to the actual site itself. So that's something I would recommend.
Is that a right-click copy address?
There's some
Yeah.
websites, and then Bitly, you can put a plus at the end.
A plus, that's what I was thinking
It'll
of.
show you the full statistics of that.
Yep, so Bitly, you put a plus at the end and it'll show you like all the information that's been tied to that one.
Oh, nice. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for reminding me, yes.
In the next year, what should we be most alert for?
Ooh, and the next year more alert for. I don't think phishing's going away anytime soon. And just like this gentleman said he's seen with his clients, it's gonna get a lot more personable. Because the kind of spray and pray thing, it's not that fruitful. And when you are pretending to be someone legitimate or typo squatting or even spoofing things that look so much more realistic, those are the things people are going to fall for. And I think that one's here to stay for a while. Yes?
I've seen a big uptick in less mass spamming, phishing, a lot more spear phishing.
Yep.
Don't forget about Google Doors.
Google, yeah, Google.
Do it yourself once in a while with your clients. Teach them how to do it because people are finding the information because it's out there, it's in social media. People don't think about that. So.
Absolutely. All right, well, I am out of time for questions. I really appreciate lots of really good questions. And again, if you think of anything, just shoot me a message. And I really appreciate you guys coming. Thank you so much.